Hello and welcome to another A-Tippling Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. Tonight is a special occasion. Oh goodness, isn't it special? Not only have we reached, or I say we because this is my channel, but there's a collective going on here. Not only have we reached 1,986 subscribers, which is just a phenomenal number to reach. I mean, it's the greatest number on earth or something. But I'm joined at the moment by Dr. Aaron Adair. So that's fantastic as well. I mean, what a double whammy. Welcome, Aaron. And we're going to speak some science tonight and some telescopes and galaxies and universe stuff. And also field questions from all of you who are out there, all two of you at the moment. So please hit us with your questions. This is a kind of an open mic night to some degree, or not quite open mic. It's open mic for us too. but you please get your questions in, and let's have some conversations going on. Aaron, how are you? And
I'm doing all right, though. I do actually like the idea of having an open mic, have some people come in and start spitting some lyrics.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that could go bad, but you know, let's do it. So this has been a fairly recent phenomenon. This channel. I mean, this channel's been going for 11 years or something. Back when I used to have hair and sideburns that had color and youth and probably more intelligence. And sort of then at the back end of last year, I thought, right, I'm going to have to work from home. I've got multiple sclerosis, as I'm sure most of you know, because I do often leave that one in there. And so I had to quit my job, my teaching job, and I work from home now. And I thought, right, I need to be able to afford to pay my mortgage. So one way I can do that, as well as writing books and writing articles and being basically a reporter for Only Sky, and my day job, I do 24 hours a week, but also a YouTube channel. And so that kind of started, and I've had great help from people like Derek Lambert of Myth Vision and Neil Sendlak of Gnostic Informant, and then some great guests and regular guests such as Aaron. So I have an awful lot of thanking to do, which is you know, thanking all the people that have been on this channel, being interviewed, all the guests I've had, and some brilliant guests, and Aaron, and the hands as well. That's a joke. But also all the great contributors and people who have watched, viewers, and people who are part of this community. So that's my kind of like, thanks guys, I really appreciate that. I'm sure I have one towards the end as well, waxing lyrical about how awesome you all are. But you know, this has become a reality, and I really do appreciate all of you. Sorry, that's a lot of me talking, Aaron. But you know, Aaron's been on here a number of times, and I really appreciate him and the contributions he's made to bringing some intelligent scientific commentary rather than my just rambling on. So that's brilliant. Just before Aaron and I go a bit, you know, hammer and tongs, and hello to everyone. Hello to all of the people that said hello. By the way, just to let you know, this is the hottest day in recorded history in Britain. So global warming, thanks. But that's, you know, it's a little bit, actually heat is really bad for MS. So I've been struggling to walk today, and actually I fell over last night I had my first big MS fall, and I just took out half of my study over there, half of my office. And yeah, so that was a bit rubbish. But yeah, so it's pretty warm here. So I have my fruit juice, which is pear and cider orientated. It's from New Zealand, but there you go. That's all I could find in the fridge. Constellation Pegasus, thank you so much. Awesome. And Constellation Pegasus is kind of where we're going to be talking to some degree tonight. Can you tell us about Constellation Pegasus? Does that mean anything? Is that a meaningful phrase there, Aaron?
Well, there is a constellation called Pegasus, and Pegasus from Greek myth, the flying horse that was by Bellerophon most famously had to fight the Chimera.
You seem to be to me that you're echoing on yourself. So I don't know. There's something funky going on there.
Let me see what could be wrong.
No,
I mean,
you sound good now.
Okay. Oh, okay, everything's all right. But yeah, Pegasus from Greek myth, but it's also one of the major constellations. When I worked at Terium, we would point it out as the square. What's wrong?
You are echoing on yourself. I don't know if there's something funky going on. I'll just read out Constellation Pegasus to have a look at your settings. So I'd like to see an episode on the Israelite flat Earth and dome canopy cosmology. Actually, Constellation Pegasus said this in Derek's 50,000 subscriber party the other day. He says Ben Stanhope's book is unbelievable. What other books are out there to read? So I guess the history of cosmology and how religions understand cosmology. And how we've moved from a flat Earth to understanding our present, heliocentricity. I don't know. Sorry, Aaron, I cut you off there because there's some funky sounds.
Is I sound better? Let's see.
Well, there's still some
better, worse.
I don't know. Go, keep talking. Excellent. I can't hear you at all now. Brilliant. So.
Ooh, okay. How about now?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I literally unplugged my microphone, plugged it back in. That seems to be the ultimate solution to all technologies. We'll be sending, rovers to other galaxies, and they'll still fail, and there'll still have to be some guy unplugging it and plugging it back in. Doesn't matter what AI technology we have; it'll always be the same.
Well, I mean, just to before you answer my question about Constellation Pegasus, there was the famous is it the Beagle, the Viking, the one that went to one of the planets in our solar system that was a joint venture between NASA and the European Space Agency. And of course, the European Space Agency does everything metric. NASA had to put all their computations into metric, but someone forgot to do one very important calculation, and so the probe just carried on going. It's just like,
not quite. Instead of it carrying on like that, its distance sensor wasn't correctly converting between measurements, so it fired its retro rockets too late, and so instead of landing, it turned into a crater.
Oh, really? I thought it went. So it actually just like crashed, and that was the end of that. That's billions of dollars wasted.
Yeah, something like a couple $100 million turned into a crater.
Yeah. So Constellation Pegasus. Tell us about what Constellation Pegasus is.
Okay. So besides being currently the best contributor to the channel right now, the constellation itself is the Pegasus of Greek myth, the flying horse ridden by Bellerophon to fight the Chimera, for example. In the sky, it's basically this square shape that you can point out relatively easily, usually seen especially easy in like the spring and summer night sky. I pointed out usually a lot when I worked at a planetarium because and that square, that's a flying horse, obvious.
Yeah, for sure.
To answer his question, there was a really good chapter in The Christian Delusion by, the name is escaping me right now, but he wrote this, whole...
You carry on talking and I'll get the book.
Yeah. So this whole great chapter basically going through and saying, here's the cultural background for the biblical cosmology. Here's the examples of finding that in Genesis and in various other writings. So whether it's the Psalms, writings of the prophets, things like that, all pointing out, the cosmology is flat Earth, sky dome, held up by pillars, giant amounts of water above us, because that was basically the cosmology that you found in Egypt, in Sumer, in Babylon, in Ugarit. Basically, it was the exception to find anyone who wasn't a flat earther until you get to people like Aristotle, who basically, made observational and theoretical arguments against flat eartherism and slowly changed the biblical view. And by slowly, I mean, maybe it's not flat earth in the New Testament, but it still has a sky dome of sorts. It still has the firmament. And you don't really get past that until the 17th century.
Are you sure it wasn't in Christianity in a light of science and not
I'm
Christian
pretty
Delusion.
sure, in part because that's a book I contributed to, and that same chapter wasn't in there.
We've got David Eller, Valerie Tarrico, Jason Long, John Loftus, Edward Babinski, Paul Tobin, John Loftus.
Yeah, it was Babinski. Babinski's the one who wrote the chapter on
the
biblical
cosmology of the cosmology of the Bible. Yes, so that's chapter 5. Sorry, just missed it. Chapter 5 in the Christian Delusion. So all of John Loftus's anthologies are really, really good. You know, they are just fantastic collections of some really good thinkers, including a book with a chapter from myself and yourself, Aaron, in. So obviously, brilliant anthologies. But yeah, so hopefully Constellation Pegasus, that answers that. At least, was there any book that you think is a particularly good book, just in terms of cosmology, Aaron?
Let's see here. So, like I say, the one that Babinski puts together, that chapter condenses so well so much of the other scholarship and the primary sources, making it absolutely clear that, yeah, the original view of the Bible was the snow globe view. Yeah, his book and his sources are pretty much, I would say, the go-to.
Excellent. And wow, Constellation Pegasus, goodness me, thank you so very, very much. Possibly the last question. What's the story with the Pegasus Square? Can't remember. So
like many of the Greek heroes, the Greeks would project them into the sky. So all in the same region of the sky, you can find actually constellations that are supposed to be part of a similar story. So, for example, constellation Perseus, Andromeda, Cephas, and Cetus, the sea monster, all together because they're all part of the same story of Perseus defeating the sea monster, holding the head of Medusa to save the princess Andromeda, the daughter of King Cephas, and they're and also with Queen Cassiopeia, and they're all in that same part of the sky. So basically, if you just look at one part of the sky, you can watch Clash of the Titans without having to pay a movie ticket. And Pegasus, then that mythical horse then being put into space. Why that particular square? In older systems, in the Babylonian system, I think that square was literally a farmer's field. So it was the Greeks who transformed it into their own Greek myth. When the Greeks were basically creating their system of constellations that we know, that's probably sometime in the 3rd century BC, and is a combination of their older myths and the other system that the Babylonians had that they literally called the barbarian sphere. And what the Greeks did was kind of combine both together. So there's some things that are kind of like a direct pull from older Mesopotamian sources, and some of it is Greek thinking of ideas.
And I know we on this in a previous video that we did on aliens, which everyone should go and watch. It's a great video, obs. But remind us a little bit, Aaron, about how there's this interesting idea that, and this includes the Bible, so the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Bible, how our own mythologies and actually in that case religions are based upon the particularity of our night skies and what we see around us. And this then shows that perhaps our religious stories and tales aren't as universal as we think they are, and you wouldn't have those stories in other galaxies around the universe, because the night sky would look completely different. And basically what's happened is we've made up tales from the night sky that we see.
Yeah, I gave a couple of examples of that, one relating to some of the Greek myths. So, for example, in the northern sky, you have Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the big bear and the small bear. And the Greeks had a whole story for this, that actually these bears were, the great bear was actually a previous sexual conquest of Zeus. Before she was human, then she was turned into a bear. And one day her son of this previous encounter with Zeus is out bear hunting, and then of course is chasing after her transformed into a bear, not knowing otherwise. And at the last minute, Zeus comes in and basically takes his former lover by the tail, swings her around and throws her into the sky to become that constellation, and then also takes her son and does the same thing, transform him into a bear, put him in the sky as well, so that way they can both be immortally there. And this story of an animal being taken up into the sky to live immortally, but being saved at the last minute from actual mortal death from a hunter is actually this extremely ancient myth that goes back at least 15,000, maybe 30,000 years into the past. And it spread basically from nomadic groups starting in Siberia and then extended out to the Americas, into Europe, into elsewhere in Asia. And the whole reason this story actually existed is in part because of the location of Ursa Major, where it was located low on the horizon during the winter. So that way it would look like this is actually that animal right on the horizon, just barely surviving, as it is right there at that edge point. And then that transforming as it traveled around the world, so to speak. So this accident of our location, of what we see in the sky, is ultimately an accident because not only is it the imagination of the people looking at the sky, but our location in the galaxy changes what stars we see, how bright they are, the relative position of those stars to each other. That if we were just to move the Earth, a few light years one way or the other, we could have radically different constellations, and our myths would be then profoundly changed. And I also gave the example, a more biblical example. So in the prophet Isaiah, there is this dirge against the Babylonian king, and refers to him as, in the Hebrew, Helel ben Shachar. And this is usually translated as morning star, son of dawn. And the fall of the morning star in this story then is supposed to presage like the doom that the Babylonian king was going to have. The thing is, though, the morning star, basically being another term for planet Venus, is only a morning star because Venus is closer to the sun than Earth, so it can only ever be seen on the eastern or western horizons. For the longest time, like the Greeks thought that these were two different bodies. They called it one Lucifer and the other Vesper, or Phosphoros and Hesperos, for morning star and evening star. We'd only realize that, hey, this is actually the same object much, much later. And it's just a fact of the geometry of Venus being closer to the sun than Earth is, that it creates that geometry that you'll never see Venus late at night. If there were no Venus, or if Venus existed in a different part of the solar system, there would be no morning star, and then there would be none of this dirge against the Babylonian king. But more importantly, for Christian theology, this is often the verse cited to describe the fall of Satan, and calling him Lucifer, the morning star. So
this is where it gets important, because if you're talking about Lucifer being a universal kind of figure throughout the entire universe, as this happened, kind of, I suppose, objectively, I don't know what word is the correct word to use, but happened irrespective of or of Earth in and of itself, then you have a problem, because the story seems to be generated from our understanding of the constellations around us. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfectly it. That if the fall of Satan is supposed to be this universal truth, but it only makes sense in the context of some astronomical accidents for our particular planet. How are we supposed to evangelize to the aliens and tell them about the fall of the morning star? And they're like, we don't have any of those in our solar system.
Indeed.
What the hell are you talking about?
So just to remind people that Aaron and I are writing a book at the moment on what would be the impact on religions and theology in the light of the discovery of intelligent alien life, and it's a fascinating book so far, or at least the subject is fascinating. I can't speak for the book itself. We're only a third of the way through writing it, but certainly it's turning up some really fascinating source material and a whole heap of rabbit holes that we can't help but jump down. Does Constellation Pegasus, I hope that answers your question. We went off on one, which is kind of the point of this. So thank you, and thank you again. So did you, Aaron, did you fully answer the Pegasus Square for him?
I think I was at least in the hood, but Constellation, let us know if there's other details that need to be considering. But largely an accident that square was forced by the Greeks out of a lot of inspiration. In particular, if you actually look at of that horse. So first off, obvious wings; those are kind of added on. There's no of the horse. It's only like a horse.
You're repeating yourself again, as in like the echo is going on again. So you might need to pull yourself out and plug yourself in again. But of course, what about the Raelians, though? I mean, seriously, I actually wrote a piece on Tom Cruise recently for Only Sky, and so just before we get on to talking about the James Webb Telescope, just to let you have a little look at this. There we go. Oh, we're not gonna. There we go. Share that. So that's what we're going to look at in a second. But if you want to check out my Only Sky work, there's plenty on there. I've recently written a piece on phenomenal conservatism and skeptical theism, which I might have a little chat about in a second. But sometime back, I wrote a piece on Tom Cruise and this idea that he believes in crazy stuff. Why do we still keep going and watching his films, and why does the media not have a go at him? And there's lots of reasons, but it's largely cognitive dissonance, but also, you know, he pulls quite a lot of power in who gets interviews and things like that, and what happens during these interviews. And but people have nostalgic reactions to certain people and certain ideas, like Top Gun film, and so that comes out, everyone's loving it, which is relevant for 1986, can I just say, because Top Gun was a 1986 blockbuster, and we had Running Up That Hill was #1 by Kate Bush, or at least it was in the UK. And you know, we had all these things going on, and then it's 2022 and it's like it's 1986 again. So, and I chose 1986, 1986 is only a random number for this party, but there's loads of cool connections there. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I'm just going off on one about sort of Tom Cruise. The idea is that how Scientology is given the time of day that it is. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous because their belief system is insane, and it is incredibly like a cult. So, you know, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Scientology, Aaron?
The only question ever is it less probable than standard forms of theism? Because at least the aliens are natural instead of supernatural, so they kind of have that advantage. But on the other hand, from what I understand, L. Ron Hubbard's intergalactic empire or federation, I forget what term he uses, is supposed to be trillions of years old. So literally the Federation of Galaxies is older than the universe. So you could say it's also the most directly scientifically disproven.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the fact
but
that
it's
the
also
whole
worth
thing...
noting this isn't the same as the Raelians. This is a whole nother alien group that Solbeck is bringing up.
Oh, have I confused Raelians with Thetans? I have. No, talk to me about Raelians then.
So I don't know enough of the particulars, but the guy who started it, who goes by the name of Rael, basically, you know, claims to be a UFO contactee and has started a cult around him. So basically, it's like L. Ron Hubbard, but instead of him channeling ancient galactic history, he's supposed to be channeling direct contact or recent visitations from said aliens. I don't know how much detail he gives about the aliens themselves, but like previous contactees, if you went back to the 1950s and like one of the early contactees to start a UFO cult, George Adamski, he described the aliens as basically 6-foot Norwegian-looking creatures. So basically, aliens are superpowered and they're Aryans. Oops. Yeah.
Yep. Who knew? So Paul Cherry says the aliens could be like space Susas. I'm not sure. Saucers?
Saucers, maybe?
Saucers. I don't know, Paul. You might have to clarify that thought.
I think actually one of the Raelian temples is supposed to be flying saucer shaped, but my recollection of that is very vague. I think also the Raelians have been like really big into cloning, and they claimed that they'd actually cloned a person several years ago. But when people said, "And what's your evidence?" and by the way, that's really unethical. And by the way, what's the evidence? Nothing ever actually materialized. It looked like it was a bit of a media gimmick.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and thank you very much, Paul, by the way. It's really, really kind. And thank you again, Constellation Pegasus. which gets us onto one of the main topics we're going to talk about tonight, which is, will James Webb be able to concentrate at an individual first galaxy's stars? Will be great to verify what theory says what we'll see. I don't know if you can unpick that. But before we go into talking about what Constellation Pegasus says here, do you want to just introduce why James Webb is hitting the news, just to introduce the idea to people, and what's so much better about James Webb than poor old Hubble?
All right. So the James Webb Space Telescope has been a project that took, well, it pretty much went through a lot of development hell. It was, the time between its conception and all the construction stuff is something like on the order of 20 or 30 years. In part because of management issues, in part because so much of the technology had to be absolutely perfect for it to work. So what this is a space telescope like Hubble, in that it's outside of Earth's atmosphere to get even much more clear pictures of the night sky. But there's a few things that make it different. One is the size. So Hubble Space Telescope's aperture, the size of the hole basically that light goes through, is a much smaller fraction of what James Webb is. And the bigger you make the telescope, the more light it can collect, the higher resolution it can get, things that are a lot better. Secondly, the James Webb Space Telescope is going to be using much less visible light, which is what the Hubble uses, and much more in the infrared. And the reason that's going to be useful is actually in part to answer Constellation Pegasus's question. The further back you look into the universe and the further back you look in time, the galaxies are moving faster and faster away from us, and this actually makes the light more and more red, what we call red shifting. And this is because actually of the expansion of the universe itself. And the further you get away from two different points in the universe, the faster and faster that expansion is, and so the greater and greater that redshift effect is. Now, this has the problem that if something is really severely redshifted, it won't even be in the visible spectrum anymore. It might move from blue to green to red to the infrared, where the human eye can't see anymore. So by James Webb being an infrared telescope, it can actually see these much more severely redshifted and thus much more distant in space and time galaxies. And of course, by having this huge aperture, it can collect more light and much more quickly also collect enough light to produce high resolution images.
There's an interesting thing about the Goldilocks Zone. So the Goldilocks Zone is often thought about in terms of exoplanets, planets that can give life a chance. So it's not too hot, not too cold, just close enough to the sun, got water, all these kind of things. And that's the kind of Goldilocks zone. But there's a Goldilocks zone in terms of time, arguably, whereby we are at the best place at the moment to be able to understand our universe. So I was reading something, not too long ago about that if we were trying to do what we're doing now in, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, something like 2 billion years, the universe would be so inflated and expanding at such a rate that you wouldn't be able to see the things we're able to see now, and to understand things like redshift and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know the exact details. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, because actually that was something that I think was originally published by Lawrence Krauss about a decade or so ago, that because, not only is the universe expanding, but at that accelerating rate due to dark energy, we only can know about that because we can see the distant galaxies. But as the galaxies get farther and farther away, the faster and faster they're moving. So eventually, at a certain point, the speed that they are moving away from us is greater than the speed of light, and you can't even see them anymore. And that's the limit of what we call the observable universe. As time goes on, more and more galaxies are going to be beyond that threshold. And so, in a few billion years, we may not be able to detect most of the galaxies of the universe. And so we might look out and only see our own galaxy. And so the evidence of expansion of the Big Bang, of an accelerating universe, will all literally be behind a wall that will be forever beyond our grasp. So we are lucky in that sense, but lucky in the sense that in the window we have is still like billions of years long. It's not like next Tuesday we lose the ability.
Yes, this is true. Yes, but it's just an interesting idea that you think, at any point you can find out anything about the universe as long as you've got the right, tools or this and that. But actually, no, there is a particular window that is, that lends itself to understanding the universe better. And if you're outside of that window, then actually you don't see a lot. You're looking at a brick wall. Thank you so much, Constellation Pegasus. Messed up individual first galaxies and first individual stars. Aaron, that's over to you.
So we almost would certainly be able to see maybe some of the first galaxies, the first stars. That might be really hard to resolve because you are going so far back in time at so much of a distance that even Webb might not be able to resolve an individual star from roughly 13 billion years ago. But at least the first galaxies, I think so. And also just to give some cosmic sense of history to this. So current estimate, the age of the universe is about 13.7 billion years ago. Billion with a B, as in boy, oh boy, is that a lot of years. For the first approximately 380,000 years of the universe is what we say was opaque. That if you tried shining a light, or if you're trying to actually see something a couple light years away, you wouldn't be able to, because the universe would be filled with plasma, and light trying to get through plasma being absorbed by there would just be constantly bounced around, and you couldn't really see anything clearly. You could see your hand in front of you, but you wouldn't be able to like see into the distance. Like we can look basically into infinity without any limits. For the first 380,000 years, the universe was too hot, too full of plasma for that to be possible. After about 380,000 years, the universe had grown enough and been able to cool off enough that you could actually have atoms starting to form, and then light could pass through the universe unimpeded. And for millions and millions of years after that, the universe would be completely dark. There'd be no stars. There'd be no plasma. It'd just be blankness for millions of years. And then finally, in that darkness, enough gas had been collected together by the force of gravity to start falling in and producing enough pressure and heat at their cores to begin atomic fusion and form the very first stars.
I feel more knowledgeable now than I did 2 minutes ago. So thank you. That is hugely impressive. Well, yeah. Okay. Before you go on, let's have a look then. Let's. This is one of the James Webb Telescope's pictures, and those are, as far as I understand it, those are not stars. They are entire galaxies.
So what's going on here? So to make clear, so first off, there are some individual stars here. The things that have like the long spikes coming from those are stars in our own galaxy, and they're so close and so relatively bright, it's basically causing these artifacts in the cameras. It's basically glare. Anytime you have a bright light, you get glare like
these ones. Yeah. Oops.
Yeah. So you have like this combination of things that are super far away and stuff that astronomically is super close, and almost looks like the opening title screen from Doctor Who back in the 80s.
Right.
I'm now imagining a giant head of Peter Davison flying through space right now.
What better thing to imagine?
You're giving me the vibe that you haven't watched the classic series of Doctor Who.
Well, I have, when I was a wee nipper, and
okay.
my memory of those are very dim and distant, rather like these galaxies. So many of those things, though, are galaxies that are billions and billions of stars.
Oh, yes. And in particular, the reason some of these have these kind of weird shapes to it is what Webb was focusing on was a galaxy cluster, and because of its gigantic mass, the galaxies that are further away but behind it, the light is actually being bent by the gravity. There is so much mass of these clusters of galaxies that it literally bends the entire fabric of space and time and stretches out the light from these sources and kind of bending it around. Now, for an astronomer, this is great because you can actually use how much the light is being bent to measure the mass of the galaxies in question. So this is also just good for straight up measurement. But, for us, we look at this and we can also be awed by the beauty of it. Another thing that's worth telling is by looking at the color of these galaxies, that already very quickly can tell you how far away and how old this light is. Because again, the further and further the galaxies are away, the more and more they're going to be redshifted by the expansion of the universe. So that really dark, crimson red galaxy that I see in the like upper right hand corner region, that must be one of the most distant of the galaxies in this image, just because it's so crimson red. Yeah, that one and that one.
Yeah. But what is worth reminding people is that a galaxy is 100, 200 million, what, solar systems?
Oh, so depends. So if they're like our Milky Way galaxy, they have something on the order of hundreds of billions of stars.
Right. So I was out by a long way. So literally hundreds of billions of stars in each
Yeah.
of those, what look like stars.
Yeah.
Those are concentrations of billions, hundreds of billions of stars, and each of those stars might have no planet. It might have 20 planets, orbiting or more. You just don't know. And
Yeah.
and the idea is that if life has started here, then yeah, we're pretty certain life has started somewhere else as well, given the sheer volume of potential planets that could sustain life that there must be.
Yeah. It's also probably good to give us some perspective on this image as well. Like, how big of a place in the sky are we looking? And the usual way this is explained is if you took a grain of sand and held it at arm's length, and that patch of sky that grain of sand is covering, that's the size of sky that James Webb was focused on to produce this image.
Which means that there's 360 around that as well of grains of sand. There's just a phenomenal amount of space out there.
Yeah. Right now, the estimates of the number of galaxies in the observable universe is on the order of hundreds of billions. And there's been some recent
Sorry, that's
modeling.
hundreds of billions of galaxies.
Yes,
Each with
hundreds of
billions of stars.
And right now, there are some arguments that this might be an underestimate, that we may not be actually seeing some of the smaller satellite galaxies. So just like the Earth has the moon as a satellite, other galaxies can have smaller galaxies orbiting them. But because they're smaller, they're harder to detect. And there has been some argumentation that if we project out our ability to detect and how it's harder to detect them further and further away, it really might be the case that there might be not hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable universe, but trillions or even tens of trillions.
Which, as far as I understand it, and I'm no mathematician, but that's quite a lot.
Yeah, it's somewhere between here and here.
Yeah. So what does this mean? Like, really, we are a pale blue dot. What it means, I guess, is that we are insignificant in the whole scheme of things. That there are potentially, almost limitless numbers of instances of life out there, and potentially intelligent life, and all the ramifications that those conclusions would have, in the sense of thinking of our own self-importance, getting our sort of pride in check, but also the impact that this might have, and this is what we're writing a book about, the impact that this might have on religions and how they would react given this knowledge. I spoke to a pastor the other day who came to visit me. Actually, he's the manager of my boys' football team, and he knows I do all this and write these books and stuff. So we've had a couple of interesting conversations. But he was like, I was explaining the book that we're writing, Aaron, and he you could tell straight away that because he's quite an evangelical. It's quite an unusual for the UK. We don't have too many evangelical type pastors, but he's, I think, pretty evangelical. And I really got the sense straight away that he was like, no, I'm pretty, he didn't want there to be life existing out there, or that would cause a problem for his theology, without his, even though he probably wouldn't have thought about it before, but you could tell there was this gut reaction and the idea that there might be billions of incarnated. Yeah, we had a little chat about some of the details, and he's like, he couldn't accept that there would be that the Trinity, part of the Trinity would itself then be split a billion times into coexisting incarnations of God on different planets.
Yeah, it's interesting that he was having that trouble because one of the papers we were reading on this is that the Christian philosophers on there were arguing there isn't an issue with there being multiple Jesuses across the galaxy, that basically he has multiple personalities in effect. So there could be billions of Jesuses throughout the universe, and that's somehow consistent with the Trinity. But I guess considering the Trinity already says 1 equals 3, 3 equals a billion is no more of a leap.
Yeah, I mean, the Trinity is such a headache, really. It just doesn't work, and yet it's the basis. I mean, I keep talking about this. I talked about this with Derek the other day. Like, it's incredible that the two biggest components of Christianity are the Holy Trinity and atonement, and these two ideas just don't make sense. Like, there are the most prevailing theory of the Trinity is Mysterianism, which is it's a mystery. I don't know how it works. I just have faith that it works. That's not good enough for me. With something as fundamental as the Holy Trinity, I've got to have that making sense. Same but different. Yeah, how are they same, how are they different? And how is it not heresy and modalism and all these kind of arguments? And then you've got atonement, which is God foreknowingly designs and creates all humanity, makes us fallen and broken and not very good, and then demands payment for that. It's just like, what? So those two ideas are just fundamentally shot, and then that's the foundation upon which Christianity is built. And you're like, phew.
Yeah, and then the idea to multiply that to every civilization in the universe, just makes it all the more difficult to add up.
Yeah, and so what we're discussing in the book, and sorry, we have talked about this in previous videos, but what we're doing is looking at things like some of the scripture and some of the doctrine that comes from the scripture, like atonement and the fall, and saying, well, look, if all alien intelligent life is, or if alien life is intelligent and there's huge amounts of it, then it would be pretty odd to think that they weren't all moral agents as well. Mm-hmm. And if they're all moral agents, then they should all be fallen as well, because if they're not fallen and we are, then it makes it look really unfair for us. Why are we fallen and they're not? So if you've got perhaps trillions of examples of fallen alien life, then they would need redeeming in some way, which means Jesus would have to be incarnated in alien form in trillions of different instances, and that's just kind of mind-boggling. But as you say, the paper that we are using largely to base the structure of the book states that, well, multiple personality disorder is a thing, so God can do that. And it's like, but hang on, not sure. That's a bit of a jump there.
Yeah. Ooh, Constellation Pegasus has another good question here, but I'm going to counteract it if you want to bring up the website you were showing before. So concentrating on those red galaxies and the most ancient ones and looking at galactic evolution, yes, absolutely great. But I think you also want to look at things also a little bit closer to home. So there's a spectrum image in this NASA page as well. If we want to bring that up. No, it's a WASP in 96b. Yeah. This
I love the fact that Aaron went, to a graph. Yeah, graph.
My whole life is based on making graphs and interpreting them, okay? That is my day job. Make graphs, do science.
Nice.
All right. This is the measurements of the spectrum of a planet in another solar system in our galaxy. And one of the other absolutely wonderful things that James Webb is going to be able to do that goes beyond what Hubble was able to do is figure out what is actually in the atmosphere of planets. So this is a gas giant. I forget how many light years away. And by looking at the light that is coming off of the planet, we can actually see in the spectrum of light, there are going to be like these little gaps, these holes, corresponding to particular wavelengths of light being absorbed by the molecules in that atmosphere. So by basically reading which lines are in there that are missing, you're figuring out what elements, what chemicals, what molecules are floating in that atmosphere. And so in this case, they were pointing out by measuring that spectrum there, they were able to figure out that in the atmosphere is water. And why does this matter? Well, the policy of NASA is if you want to find life or the best candidates for life, follow the water. Water is the absolute best guess of what we have as a precondition for life. If you have liquid water, you have the possibility of life because water is this fantastic molecule for dissolving things, for allowing chemical reactions to take place. We know we need water, and it looks like there's a reason water is so useful, that it allows so much chemistry to become actually possible. So that we can find water in gas giants is already great, but it also means we can now start using James Webb to look at the atmosphere of Earth-like planets. And if they have water, or even more importantly, perhaps methane, if they find significant amounts of methane in the atmosphere, which is generally only produced by biological processes, as far as we know, we might know if there are basically bacteria colonies on other planets in the not too distant future. That's at least a possibility of what James Webb makes possible.
I mean, as amazing as that is, it's not as beautiful as that. I mean, look at that. All right, someone's painted that.
Well, they improved on the previous painting. So this is actually something that was pictured by Hubble several years ago as well. And if you put the two pictures side by side, you can see just how much of an improvement James Webb is in getting the details of this nebula. And for everyone, a nebula is basically a collection of gas and dust. It is the place that stars are born in, where the gas and dust can actually begin to collapse and start forming stars and entire solar systems with those. Our sun started in some sort of nebula 4.5 or 5 billion years ago. And the Earth and all the other planets and asteroids and comets formed along with the sun in that time period as well. And some wispy object just like this.
Marvelous. I think it's just beautiful. So thank you so much, Idiosyncrasy, for your contribution. Congratulations on the 2K. Awesome. Whoop, whoop, 2K. Although 1986, before we answer that question, here are some 1986 fun facts. Reagan was in charge of America. So just, he signed the Goldwater-Nichols Act into law. The Polar Bear satellite was launched, and the Soviets launched the space station Mir. The space shuttle Challenger broke apart. You remember that? I remember watching that on TV as a kid. It's terrible that. Rupert Murdoch launched a Fox Broadcasting Company, and the network began with 79 affiliate stations that reached 80% of homes in the United States. Wow!
Not
I wish you hadn't done that.
That was 96. Oh, wait, Fox, not Fox News. Fox. Gotcha.
Yeah, Fox Broadcasting. Yeah.
Okay. The Fox that has The Simpsons, not the Fox that has everything that The Simpsons complains about.
Yes, yeah. How ironic. And Halley's Comet appeared. And what else can I say? Last one. Michael and Jennifer were favorite baby names. Angel hair pasta and chocolate mousse were food trends, and perms and denim were all the rage. Damn straight. Out of Africa won the Oscar for Best Picture. The Golden Girls won an Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series, and We Are the World won 4 Grammy Awards. There you go. There's some 1986 facts for you. I'm bringing it. So,
and of course, to all of our guests, we hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for being a friend, from being there and back again.
Excellent.
You mentioned the Golden Girls, so I was
lost on me. And in fact, of course, is she the final one? Just recently passed away.
Oh yeah, Betty White. She
Betty
died just
White.
before her 100th birthday. Strangely enough, she was also I think she was actually also one of the oldest women on the show, even though the character Sophia was supposed to be the most elderly of them. She was actually one of the youngest of the actors on that show, of the main cast.
Before I go back to idiosyncrasy, Sobek says, and the greatest heavy metal album of all time came out, Jonathan, Stripers to Hell with the Devil. So I have been, I'm going to challenge that. I've been just heavily obsessed recently with a YouTube channel called Charismatic Voice, but basically just going through loads of different reaction channels, and I love a bit of reacting to Iron Maiden, and I'm in a place where I'm watching a lot of people just sitting watching Iron Maiden, and Rage Against the Machine, and then I'm like watching people watching stuff, and for some reason it gives me great joy. But anyway, random. So idiosyncrasy. So let's back on target. Stay on target, Pierce. Stay on target. Is there
No, that line is from 1977.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, good point. Well made. Yeah. Is there any mention of alien? Nothing gets past you. Is there any mention of alien life, or even hints of alien life in the Bible or any other holy book? God is the ultimate ET. This is something we are going to be. We haven't got our teeth into that area of the book that we are writing at the moment, but I have been given some links to certain books about how linked to of aliens and demons and certain Christian cults or Christian movements having ideas about alien demonic life and that. But that's a slightly different question to whether there exist alien, hints of alien life in the Bible or other holy books. What are your first thoughts to that, Aaron?
So the Bible itself doesn't seem to have the concept of creatures that live around other stars. But conversely, modern interpreters will take a different view to it. And in particular, there's a few key things from the Bible, especially the Old Testament, that people on the show Ancient Aliens will come to over and over and over and over and over and over again. The two that stand out the most are the story from Genesis 6 with the coming down of the angels sleeping with human women and producing the Nephilim. This is often seen as aliens coming down and apparently finding human women attractive and having sexual relations with them, and then producing all these alien-human hybrids to explain, I guess, how we got smart. We were sexed into consciousness, I guess.
Nice. My theologian friend Rob, who's has a friend, a theologian who's moved to Australia or maybe is Australian, and he's got a big YouTube channel, has written a bunch of books in a very kind of Graham Hancock, Fingerprints of the Gods, Ancient Aliens type way, where he is now, as a Christian, has kind of moved his Christianity to properly believing that aliens better explain many of the Bible stories, and kind of this kind of new understanding of Christianity that I haven't really looked into in any depth. I just don't have the time, but it's something I will have to consider for our book.
Yeah, people have been doing that since at least the 1960s.
And just like von Daniken, Graham Hancock, von Daniken. So I mean,
actually, with von Daniken, it's actually a bit of an interesting story with him. So first, for background, Eric von Daniken, Swiss hotelier turned ancient astronaut, talking head. He probably is the biggest reason it became popular because of the book he wrote called Chariots of the Gods in the late 1960s, was serialized in, I believe, the National Enquirer, turned into a film with Rod Serling, the voice behind the Twilight Zone, for example. So it got some jump from there. There are some indications that in earlier drafts of that book, he was going to go all out and say Jesus was a space alien. But in the editing process, it sounds like that was pulled. And at least since that point, von Daniken has always said he's a conservative Catholic Christian and vehement anti-communist, which becomes all the more funny because some of his sources was literal communist propaganda.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Funny enough that the Soviets in the 1960s were actually pushing the idea that the Bible is based on aliens as a way to discredit religion and say, you guys are just worshiping space aliens. You don't have the correct a materialist theory of how the world works. So you should become good socialists just like us in Mother Russia.
Wow. So, do you have any other examples of how, like, the Bible or other holy books might understand aliens?
Yeah. So the other example of like the ancient alien people will point to in the Bible itself is one of the visions of Ezekiel, where he's supposed to be seeing God, but it talks about like these strange creatures of and wheels within wheels with eyes on them and smoke and fire from that. And there have been a few people who tried to argue this is supposed to be an alien spacecraft. And that's, what Ezekiel is trying to describe with his limited language. Now, if you put it into proper historical cultural context, he's talking about the throne of God as this throne that can basically move on the dome of the firmament. In other words, flat eartherism again. But details. It also has some weird things because it would suggest that this flying ship from another planet that's able to come here over, who knows how many light years runs on coal. Because it sounds like it has a coal-fired engine, and it's like, okay, we don't even use that to get to work. We're definitely not going to use that to get to space.
And this is one of those things that I find really interesting about prophecies, that they never ever, and again, sorry if I'm repeating myself from other videos, but they never ever give prophecies of things that actually genuinely happen in the future that would really show them to be actual prophecies. No one ever
that's
says
not true. I mean, there's that Jesus. He said there would be both wars and rumors of wars in the future.
Well, damn it, yeah, we been disproved straight off the bat.
Yep, yeah. There's no way, and someone without divine influence could guess that there'd be war in the future.
So what you get is you never get mention of like flying, aeroplanes, cars, intercontinental ballistic missiles, the internet, speaking to people on the other side of the world, and any of this stuff that would be, would easily show prophecies to be, true. And all you get is, there's a war that somebody's going to win. And it's like 50-50.
Yeah.
Oh, they did win.
Yeah.
And anyway, we wrote that ex eventu. We Vaticanum. We wrote it after the event, and
or so many modern prophets. There will be conflict in the Middle East. Really?
Yeah. So it's like that is the prophecy of all prophecies. Yeah, that Middle East area. It's going to be a big war. There's going to be some trouble there. But
we're not going to go into details, but boy, oh boy, it's going to be rough.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, does anyone have any questions for us? Any super chats? Obviously, please get them in, but please get your questions and comments in, and we can.
One last holy book we should probably talk about when it comes to aliens, because I can think of one holy book that does talk about gods as aliens. The Book of Mormon.
Explain.
Well, basically, it's part of, as I understand, Mormon teaching that God used to be a person like us, but on another world. And because he basically went up the ranks, he was able to create his own world. So in a very real sense, at least in those older teachings, God is a space alien.
Well, there you go. That answers that one. Book of Mormon. So if you like your aliens, that's where you want to go.
Yeah, it's a combination of both aliens and transhumanism. So it's got a lot going for it if you strip off, well, a whole lot else.
I went to see the Book of Mormon, the South Park Trade Park and Matt Stone.
Yes.
Their musical. I went to see that recently in Southampton, and it was excellent. Absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. It was good fun, but also poignant in places in what it was trying to say. Loved it.
Yeah. I think in the lyrics of that musical, they very quickly mentioned the planet Kolob. It very quickly comes up in the lyrics, and I believe that is where God was supposed to have come from.
All right. Very good. Excellent. Good knowledge.
And for those of you out there who are sci-fi fans and you know your Battlestar Galactica, one of the planets that they are trying to find in that series is Kobol. It's just an anagram of Kolob, because the person who created Battlestar Galactica was a Mormon. It's basically
really,
Battlestar Galactica is literally a combination of ancient aliens and Mormonism in space.
No way. Oh, there you go. Every day's a school day with you, Aaron. Daniel Moore, cheers for all the excellent content. Thank you so much, Daniel. You're such a great supporter of the channel. Really, really appreciate that. OG Skywatch says the Vedic Scriptures. I don't know enough about the Vedic Scriptures to know whether they would contain any. But of course, you know, the idea of, well, it's interesting. So when in writing our book, you know, reading some Thomas Paine, The Age of Reason, and Thomas Paine talks about, and this is back in the 1700s, talks about this vast plurality of life out there in the universe, and he actually said he says, well, that is obviously nonsense. You couldn't have, you know, multiply incarnated gods in the way we were mentioning earlier. And it's like, wow, Thomas Paine was ahead of the game there. It's like I'd expect that conversation to be happening in the 20th century at the latest, but the earliest, sorry. But no, lo and behold, he put his, you know, he put it right down there in the Age of Reason. So the people have been thinking about these things for longer than we may have given them credit for.
Yeah. Concerning though the Vedic scriptures, so the only thing I can think of is there is a text that ancient alien people will bring up that seems to talk about some sort of strange flying machine. But the problem with that text, I'm forgetting the names of it, but the problem is it's actually only claimed to be an ancient text. What it really is, it says it's a text that was channeled in the 1920s. And by channeled, that means somebody claimed they had a vision and said this was an ancient text that they got beamed into their head, but it's basically just some guy who barely knows what airplanes are and then just projecting that onto Hinduism.
Sounds like the Book of Mormon. It sounds like the golden tablets.
A bit, yeah. That's the only thing with Vedic or with Hindu religion that I see the connection there. Otherwise, any claims that the various gods in there are aliens, which is, you know, kind of the premise of ancient aliens in general, that all the gods, those were all just space aliens, which unfortunately also has the conceit that apparently everyone in history misinterpreted our past, except for the sports communications guy on Ancient Aliens, the guy with the tall, crazy hair, Georgios Tsoukalos. Literally, his degree is in sports communications.
Excellent. Well, you know, what more do you need? Brilliant.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Sobak, he says, thanks always, boss. We'll buy you a tea on Friday. Very generous, Sobak, it really is. There's a buy me a coffee, which is one of the things in the description that, you know, if you're so inclined. Thank you for all your support. Paul Cherry, thank you so much. So part one, the confirmation of alien life would shake the core of religion's foundation, especially the monotheistic ones, and its mainstream interpretation. Still, there will be some religions, spiritual parts. Well, it's funny. So you would be surprised at the number of people who are involved in Astro Theology. So Astro Theology is a discipline, if you didn't know, just like astrobiology, which is kind of like life out there in the universe. Astro Theology is particularly Ted Peters is a big name in that, who's written books and papers on it. So there are a lot of people, and Ted Peters is one actually who maintains that actually finding intelligent life out there will have no impact on religion. He said that both from a kind of sociological and psychological position. He's done a little bit of although I do contest a little bit of what he's found, but he has done some research into what people's opinions would be. But also from a theological point of view, doesn't seem to find there being a problem with, you know, any of the mainstream doctrines of Christianity, you know, in light of intelligent alien life. And obviously our book is I don't think we're writing this book because actually we're coming to this book kind of fresh, Aaron and I. We've got some idea, and there are some things that we definitely know I'm going to contest, but it's not like we're writing this book to say, no, this is going to be an atheistic book which is going to contest everything the Christians say. there's going to be a little give and take. There's going to be actually, yeah, no, you can have your theism here, and that's not a problem. But I'm not too sure about this, and it's not going to be, it's not. I don't think alien life, existence of intelligent alien life, will knock religion down completely and disprove it. I just think it presents, at the moment anyway, I think it presents some really, thorny issues that it would be easier for earthly religion if intelligent alien life didn't exist.
Yeah. And even conversely, we're also even trying to consider in what ways could aliens actually enforce theism, and in particular the idea if the aliens landed tomorrow and they wore crosses because they had their own Jesus, that would be a significant confirmation of the Christian idea that the fact that such a disparate world with completely different biology and astronomy and things like that, but still come to the same theological conclusions, that possibility is so astronomical without some sort of divine guidance. So it is possible that the aliens could somehow prove one of the religions. Maybe it's the Mormons.
And what's really interesting, that I don't think enough sci-fi films and TV shows and books have done this, but you'll probably say I'm completely wrong here because you've got the knowledge. But so when you think about what humanity does historically, what we have done when we've gone to like the New World or to explore in different places, is broadly we are going to look for things to enrich our culture or enrich our pockets. We are going for resources to make us rich, and if we find people, we proselytize to them. And sci-fi, I don't think, has dealt enough with this. So if there's all the like aliens coming to our planet to take all the resources and destroy us, but there's been very little that I know of where aliens have come to say, right, we've come here, you are intelligent alien life to us, have you heard of our God? It's basically like a cosmic Jehovah's Witness knocking on your door going, oh, have I told you about, have you seen, have I shown you the Watchtower before? And I think there would be a very strong chance, perhaps, or if aliens were able to overcome those vast distances to get here, that one of the first things they'd be doing is trying to proselytize to us. Possibly, but there's also all sorts of game theory involved in what aliens would or wouldn't do, possibly as well. But I just think that's something that's not often considered.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So in the series of sci-fi books, the Expanse series, that's also been turned into a show on Amazon, they do have a sect of Mormons who build a generation ship to send out to like colonize elsewhere. But once they, of course, also discovered that there are other life forms in the universe, that also then ups their idea that, okay, now we got to do proselytizing. So the Mormons were the first like religious group to really push to get out into space, according to that book series. Though often when the aliens come here, their interests are usually not quite so much to proselytize, sometimes quite the opposite. So if the aliens come, there is the question, are they going to be coming to their benefit or to our benefit? Sometimes they're almost like messianic figures, that they'll come and save us from ourselves, or somehow prevent us from our own self-destruction. But even then, that could be questionable. And I have to give probably the best twist on that I can think of from sci-fi. So it's from an episode of The Twilight Zone. So 1960s American black and white television, which means it's the best. Meeting at the UN, they have detected a flying saucer coming to Earth. And, all these heads of governments are meeting, and arguing with each other about what to do. And it says the craft is coming. It's coming here to New York. It's landing right out front of the UN building. In comes in this, giant, super tall alien with his voice box so he could communicate with everyone. And basically said, we've come here to provide you with the means of turning your deserts into farmland, of putting up protective shields between your countries so war is no longer necessary. That basically to make everything as much a peace and paradise on Earth as possible. The aliens come, they leave this book in their language on the desk there. But the aliens come and they promise everything, that the deserts literally start turning into farmland. It's just, beautiful, and war ends because there's no way to even like fight with each other anymore. There's still a Soviet Union in the US, but, they can't shoot nukes at each other. So what's the point of having tanks? So everyone becomes peaceful. There are still like a few remaining like CIA members who are still like, suspicious of things, and they're trying to interpret the book that the aliens left, and they can only like figure out the title, and it says to serve man. They figured that much out. And it's like, everything looks like, they're really here to help us. And, after many years of this, the aliens start saying, hey, we're going to now allow you to, take visits to our home planet so you can see what our world is like as well. And all these people getting on the flying saucers to, do interstellar travel because, life on Earth is peaceful. Let's now check out other places. And one of these CIA agent guys, he's, going to take one of these trips because, he's accepted that everything's great. He's in line. He's about to get in. And then one of his associates is trying to run up to him at the last minute. It's like, don't get in. Don't get in. Why? The book to serve man. It's a cookbook. Bum, bum, bum.
Nice.
They don't use a rim shot, but that's how the episode ends, with that realization. The aliens are here for our benefit insofar as we provide them the greatest of meats.
Yeah. Brilliant. Love it. So MA Context, thank you so much. Congratulations to the 2K. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Have some tip money, and I'm back to lurking. Thank you, and thank you to all you lurkers. Now, I've written, I used to write at Patheos Non-Religious before we were cancelled, and I now write at Only Sky. And, having written sort of 4,500 articles, literally that's a lot of words. I have a great degree of respect for so many lurkers. Quite often when you look at comments threads on blogs and media organizations, you get taken in by people who shout the loudest. But for all those people that shout the loudest and have these sort of really big, loud arguments, there are, 20 to 1 who are lurking there and taking it all in. And just, never forget the lurkers. Love it. So thank you so much. Paul has another comment. Let's have a look, see what Paul has to say. Thank you so much, Paul. Those that could create a chance for them to evolve. For example, some forms of tantric, esoteric Buddhism, Hinduism, and some other forms of non-mainstream ideologies through the prism of reason, logic, and scientific inquiry. I don't know if that's part of the end of the previous one.
It seems like it connected to the first part because he actually specified that was part one.
Yes. So still, there will be some religions and spiritual paths that could create a chance for them to evolve. For example, some forms of tantric. So this is and religion does evolve. Like when we see certain cultures, settlers with a religion, taking over some other country and the indigenous peoples that lived there, often there's a syncretism that goes on. So there's an amalgamation of religions. I know that in Africa there are certain like tribal religions that embody like aspects of Christianity and Catholicism, and there are all these kind of mixes of different religions. So humans are very used to doing things like that. Whether you could get an adaptation of something as big as Orthodox Catholicism, for example, I don't know. That's maybe another question. What are your thoughts on evolving religions?
It will not surprise me at all that both minor and major sects of religious traditions will find ways to adapt. I mean, even gigantic gut punches to religious traditions don't end them. I think, for example, like in Judaism, the destruction of the temple in 70 AD by the Romans, that was a monumental blow to the entire way of how Judaism functioned and the central role of that temple and its need for sacrifice and basically for God to be on earth. Rabbinic Judaism basically said, okay, we figured out a way that that's not necessary anymore. Be nice to have, but we don't need it anymore. So if they can have such a dramatic change to saying something is absolutely central to cultic practice to not necessary, then I can only expect religious groups to find ways to change, adapt, evolve by any means necessary.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Paul, for your very generous contributions there, and for the interesting stimulation to the chat. Good old Ottangelo Shroud of Turin Grasso has turned up. Non-physical value. So here we have a Christian. A non-physical value assignment is performed through the genetic code. Well, okay, really? How you might assume there's value there. I don't, I would say that's subjective. Where 61 codons are assigned to 20 amino acids, how do you explain value assignment without a mind? I don't explain value assignment. You're putting on the value with your mind. Yeah. There's only value with things that are able to give value. It's very similar to I'm a conceptual nominalist, and so you only have concepts and abstract ideas if you have a conceiving mind. Without a conceiving mind, you have no concepts.
Yeah, and some of this language here is loaded. Like the 61 codons are assigned to 20 amino acids. No, it's just that there are 61 codons that connect to these 20 different amino acids. And why is that? Not because God willed it, but that's the chemistry that actually is even permissible. These are the ways that they can line up under their chemical interactions. If the chemistry were different, it'd be a different set of codons or a different set of amino acids. It's not someone coming in and assigning it just like you're assigning a value within someone's computer code. So this is very loaded language.
Really good point. And that you got to watch that with all sorts of religious interlocutors. So I find this particularly when we're talking about abortion, pro-life or not pro-life, anti-choice and pro-choice, and where these are babies that are murdered. It's like, no, they're not babies. These are blastocysts. That's not a baby. So it's like that. You've got to watch that loaded language, because with that, they're trying to achieve their goals by really using loaded language. But I think really what the question is, why are there natural laws? Which is the question is, why is there something rather than nothing? Which is perhaps an unanswerable question, but it's the same question you can apply to God. Why is there God? Why? It's exactly the same question I would have. Here for God that Angelo Grasso or Tangelo Grasso has for the construction of the natural order. I don't see that as particularly different. I mean, I think personally, and I wrote in my Kalam cosmological argument book. So, did God create the universe from nothing? Countering William Lane Craig's Kalam cosmological argument. I think you should all get that. One small point in there is, people who assert that God as a necessary being is the best explanation for the universe. I say, well, that fails Occam's razor. It's like you're adding entities unnecessarily, because you're saying reality is God plus universe, whereas I'd say it's just universe. Something's got to be a brute fact. You argue it's God, I argue it's a universe. We can understand the universe. No one understands God. You are positing something that is a greater unknown to explain the unknowns in the universe, and that is a dodgy move. I don't go with that. Do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, it's also worth noting that so much of like the genetic system that we have, the way our cells ultimately function, is the byproduct of tens, hundreds of millions, billions of years of evolution and development. And we have a large variety of ways that things could have been differently with that history, and also how much of it really does look like chance events. So just to give one example, because it actually comes up in one of the book chapters we're writing on our aliens, and just how likely is life and intelligent life to pop up. There is a bit of a filter to get to creatures like us, to get from the original older cells of the prokaryotes and what we are as eukaryotes. For us eukaryotes, the major differences are that our genes, or I shouldn't say our genes, but like the DNA is actually all in the nucleus of a cell. Prokaryotes don't have that. And perhaps most importantly is the fact that eukaryotes have the mitochondria that allows basically the access for much more energy for a cell to use and then become bigger, more complicated things. Prokaryotes seem to become eukaryotes in part because of a strange, weird accident that happened after prokaryotes had been on Earth for at least 1 billion years. And here's like the current theory on how we actually got the mitochondria. It looks like the mitochondria itself used to be its own separate cell, its own separate prokaryote. And the other prokaryotes at the time would try to eat these sorts of cells. But apparently in this one freak chance, instead of that mitochondria being eaten, it was absorbed and became a symbiotic relationship. It would be like you eating a cheeseburger, and instead of turning it into poop, you somehow absorbed it and turned into a half man, half cow, and then gained super cow powers.
Brilliant. I mean, I love it.
You know, you would have, and because you have all this extra energy, you would have more movement.
Don't do that. Don't do that, Aaron.
Well, imagine if instead if I had some mutton.
The master of puns.
But imagine if I had some mutton, then I'd be a really bad boy.
Oh dear. So this kind of brings us on to, because then someone like Grasso here would say, you know, the chance of that happening is astronomically small. But what this really annoys me. So when theists say, you know, it's incredibly improbable, you know, abiogenesis, so the beginning of life, you know, life starting through chemical reactions, getting that one particular chemical reaction, yeah, so on and so forth. It's astronomically improbable, so therefore it didn't happen, you know, naturally. And you're thinking, right, winning the lottery is really improbable, but if you buy enough lottery tickets, it becomes a certainty. Okay, it becomes a statistical certainty. So you can't.
To me, it's not even a matter of probability; it's a matter of artificiality. If I were trying to engineer life, the way I wouldn't probably do it is have it that you have to throw prokaryotes at each other for 1 billion years, trillions and trillions and trillions of times in every single gallon of water on the surface of the Earth, again, for 1 billion years for a one-time random event to take place. That sounds like if you haven't actually engineered a system to do it, you're just throwing stuff at the wall until something finally works.
But I guess like theists would just deny any of that actually happened. They just go straight to God creating Adam and Eve. I mean, but of course you can't really argue against that because nothing will convince them otherwise. But this idea of probability is like, okay, so if this is a 1 in gazillion chance of you know, the right chemical reaction happening to create, you know, RNA or whatever it is, you know, whatever is the thing that's really improbable at the beginning of the abiogenesis. And you're thinking, right, we've got the entire universe and we've got these chemical reactions going on possibly in like hundreds of trillions places at any one time over, and maybe like every like nanosecond taking the sheer scale of the number, the frequency of interactions means that actually abiogenesis, if this is how you understand it as some kind of highly improbable but conceivably, you know, possible event, it's going to happen. It's a dead cert. And so what I get really annoyed when theists talk about probability without talking about frequency is, I guess, what I'm saying.
And in fact, to counteract that problem, so in one of the papers I'm citing in our book as well is a relatively recent one in Nature, trying to figure out like the probability of the first RNA molecule of sufficient length to actually have biological function, like how many codons would have to be like randomly arranged to actually then have that sort of function, and then working out, you know, the size of the Earth and how many opportunities there would be, and working that out. So how many stars and planets would that require, and how many lovely wives it would require? My wife walking by. Hi, sweetie.
Hello.
She says hello. And basically, you know, working out like with some, I'm not going to say dodgy assumptions, but basically just assuming a universe from like a random arrangement of RNA molecules, like how many, you know, stars or planets would that require? Like how much of the universe how much universe you would need to get like one event for it to happen. And even then, you know, he still basically says life will be rare in the universe, but it'll still at least happen somewhere in the observable universe. And that's with his somewhat more pessimistic modeling. So yeah, to me, it looks like we have enough universe to make sure that just by random chance, stuff will slap together and start eventually screaming.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I think that's really important. If alien evolution is true, then why are there still alien monkeys? Oh, brilliant. James, what a legend. So thank you. Of course, I don't understand why are there still monkeys if evolution is true. Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Anyway, that's obviously a riff on the common anti-evolutionist stance of many theistic anti-evolutionists who will say that will misunderstand evolution completely and say that humans and monkeys can't coexist because one came from the other.
Yeah,
which is itself incorrect anyway. But you get the point. I don't know that I need to go down that rabbit hole because it's been gone down 1,000 times. But thank you, James, for your kind contribution. So I think in the comments there is still a bit of a ding dong with Otangelo Grasso going on. No, he doesn't. VA, who's such a great supporter himself, needs to do a video of dad jokes. No, he doesn't. Please don't encourage him. He's just.
If I were to do such a video of nothing but dad jokes of puns on top of puns, I know what the title would be: Punishment.
Oh, jeez, that's like a meta pun. Please don't. So what do you have to say to this? There are 10 to the 100 possible molecules on early Earth. Only 4 complex macromolecules are used in life. They require very complex synthesis pathways to be made by the cell. Those were not extant on Earth.
I don't know how you know that the necessary ones weren't there. And just because there's that many possible molecules, why is that even the least bit relevant? I can go into the kitchen and have thousands of different spices, and then I bring out a hamburger, and you're like, well, how could that have possibly happened when there's all these other, spices that don't go with hamburgers? It's like, I chose the ones that go with this. It could also be that maybe some are chemically more likely than others, especially in the early Earth environment. In particular, like with the RNA world hypothesis, that RNA actually is formed and connected together because of a catalyst provided by clay and soils. So literally the soil chemistry helps define the biology. So I don't know how you can get to that.
But never has an RNA molecule been synthesized in a lab, but ribose, the backbone of RNA, disintegrates in 40 days.
And so what if you can produce it at a rate faster than that? Then you can get a buildup. So all you need to do is have some sort of process that can produce more of the molecule at a greater rate than it's dissolving. And from what I understand, this is not my area of expertise because I'm not a biologist, but people who study this sort of biology don't look at that and say, oh, molecules degrade, therefore they can't exist. Salt can degrade, but we still have plenty of salt. Why? Because of all the other processes that can produce more of it.
Yeah, if you can produce it quicker than it can disintegrate, then job done. Anyway, back to probably wrapping this up pretty soon, because, as much as this is a party that everyone wants to be at, I'm sure they have other places to be as well. Do you have anything else at the moment that's particularly interesting you in the world of science, my good man? And I'm going to get you some 1986 facts.
Well, I'm going to have to instead give you facts from a much more important year, 1984.
No, you don't. Is that when you were born or something?
Yes. Now, how about we compromise and go to 1985?
No, it's 1986. I told you, this is the arbitrary demarcation.
Well, so I'm going to party like it's 1999.
No, that's rubbish. Can I just tell you, a gallon of milk cost $2.22. Bacon was $1.69 a pound, and a dozen eggs were 87 cents in 1986. That means nothing to me because I'm not American. Just in case anyone had any shadow of a doubt. Mike Tyson won his first world boxing title. There you go. And Argentina won the World Cup. And that's football for those who don't understand. And I'm just going to tell you one more fact. Kodak left the instant camera business and Microsoft went public. 1986, everyone. It's party time.
And also 1986 is also famous for having 2 years ago had the first Macintosh.
Having 2 years ago, that's the first Macintosh.
That's my way of forcing it back to 1984.
That's terrible. That's absolutely... 1986 is famous for having a 2-year-old having a day. I'm not having it. I'm not having it. Don't you come bringing your 1984 crap onto my 1986 subscriber party, for goodness sake. Does anyone in the chats have any other questions for us? Bring them on now. Does anyone have a 1986 fact that we need to know, that we don't know? That
we need to bring up
there isn't a 2-year-old fact from 1984.
All right. Actually, there is some more movie trivia we need to bring up from the James Webb Space Telescope.
Yes. Okay, I'll bring that back up. Thank you for getting us back on track.
All right.
As we move towards the closing, this third act of our awesome party. Here we go. This is Stefan's quintet. Talk to me.
All right. Scroll that down a little bit more. Yeah, okay. Because otherwise you can't see the fourth galaxy.
Okay, I'll make it smaller. Hang on.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so as the name suggests, this quintet of 4 galaxies in this, nice, very beautiful image. The thing is, while this is indeed the, most recent, really beautiful photograph developed through James Webb's technology, this image might be familiar to you if you watch old movies. And in particular, it might look familiar in a grainier black and white format as the opening to the Frank Capra film, It's a Wonderful Life. For those of you who aren't familiar with the film, basically, if you're in America during Christmas time, it is somewhere on television just about any given time. Came out in the late 1940s, and the opening of the film has these galaxies talking to each other. They basically took an older version of this image, one that was taken in the either 1930s or 40s with a Earth-based telescope, put some lights behind it to make them glow every time the galaxies are talking. And they're supposed to be like angels in heaven talking to each other as they talk about the life and times of this one individual on Earth who is now going on hard times. But an angel, his guardian angel, will come down and try to show him how his life has actually been important, even though things have gone so poorly. It's now considered a classic movie in the US, but when it actually came out, it was a complete bomb. And the reason it became a Christmas classic is that it entered the public domain early. And when all these TV stations in the US wanted to go home for Christmas time and not have to worry about stuff, they just took a free movie, stuffed it in, and just started broadcasting it. And by mere exposure, it became more and more well-known and popular for Americans. So now it's this Christmas classic, even though it was a financial disaster when it came out. It's also a big promoter of socialism. So it's got a lot of things right.
Hey. Can I just throw in another bit of movie news or movie fact? Now, this is from Spankflaps. So Aliens, the movie, was made in 86. Was it really 86? My goodness. Stop you grinning and drop your linen. So Aliens, I'm gonna put this out here. Aliens is the single greatest action film ever made. And I won't have it any other way. So if you want to agree with me, please say so in the comments. If you want to disagree, just jog on. There's no disagreement here.
Well,
conformity.
It's an extremely good candidate, and the only one that comes to mind that challenges it is actually but from the same director, James Cameron. Terminator 2.
Yeah, good, pretty good film, but it's not Aliens. Come on, oh man, just the whole film is just awesome. The sets, the acting, everyone in there, the aliens, the script is just brilliant.
The subtle hunts to Starship Troopers.
Director's cut with extra sentry guns that just shoot down endless numbers of aliens. Just brilliant. You got androids, Lance Hendrickson. Just awesome. And you jog on if you don't think so.
Yeah, it's also worth highlighting the original Alien from 1978, 79. I'm forgetting exactly which year. Different director, completely different genre of film, but also one of the best in its genre.
Well,
79.
yeah, well, was it not Ridley Scott?
Yes, Ridley Scott did the original Alien.
Yeah.
Aliens was done by James Cameron.
James Cameron,
Yeah, they're not even in the same genre,
No,
because one is like a classic.
That's why I call it. Yeah, that's why I call it an action film, because I think it's sci-fi, obviously, and you could say it's horror, but it's just action. Brilliant.
Yeah. In fact, to give a little bit more trivia to the original Alien is highly influenced by the ancient astronaut stuff and the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. Fundamentally, the movie Alien, and perhaps even more Prometheus, is based off the H.P. Lovecraft story At the Mountains of Madness, which itself was the idea that there were aliens here on Earth in the ancient past and basically created life on Earth.
Awesome.
And this is something that not James Cameron so much, but more Ridley Scott has been toying with, that has existed since then. Like, really, a lot of what happens in the movie Alien is an adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness. So lots of aliens, lots of stories, lots of religion as well, because when Lovecraft was writing, he was also trying to make fun of a religious group at that time called the Theosophists.
Yeah, I know very little about H.P. Lovecraft. He's a bit controversial in some aspects. He was racist, wasn't he? Broadly,
he was even racist for his own time.
Right? Yeah. But he has a huge following, and there's some other 86 facts coming out here. So, Master of Puppets album released in '86, which is Metallica. I do believe. I never got into Metallica really, but so sue me. And another interesting fact is that Constellation Pegasus graduated high school in 1986. So there you go. We've all been educated. Fantastic. Well, look, if no one else has any interesting 1986 facts, we'll start drawing this to a close. Aaron, where can people? Do you want people to find you at all?
Well, I spend most of my time in deep space, so it's really hard to find me. I mean, I have a social media presence, but it's mostly that I don't really. I guess I could be a social media lurker. I'm there on the internet, but I'm not having near the interaction that others are.
There you go. So you don't go and find Aaron Adair, but you can come and find me. I'm on Twitter. I'm here at YouTube. Please like, subscribe, share, and do all those things. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions today. Really amazing. Thank you so much for all of your support over the time. I just want to say that Ottangelo Grasso in 1986 was a soldier in Switzerland. So there you go.
That is cool.
I don't know if that's cool. That's just that. Yeah, there you go. Where was I? 1986.
No, that is cool to be in Switzerland and you could be aggressively neutral.
Yeah, true that. In 1986, I lived in Hong Kong. There you go. I was 10 years old. There you go. That's a bit of you can do the maths there to see how old I am now. And when I was born. And the Hand of God goal was 86, of course. Mexico 86. Oh yeah, Maradona put England out of the World Cup with a cheat, with the Hand of God. So if we're going to talk philosophy and atheology, there was the Hand of God. He supposedly headed it in the goal, but didn't. It hit his hand. He used his hand, and it was this. This is why, we'd just been at war with the Argentinians. Imagine this happening. So that was pretty annoying. Anyway, so thank you everybody. It's been great fun hanging out for the last kind of year or whatnot, best part of the year. Please continue to support and drop by. It means everything. Otherwise I couldn't do what I do. I will continue doing my slavery series. You can check out the last one. I think I've done 4 now, where I'm walking through and talking through Hector Avalos's book, Slavery, Abolitionism, and the Ethics of Biblical Scholarship, where I look at slavery in the context of biblical scholarship. I'm also sort of interviewing other people. I've got a few people like I should be interviewing Stephen Noor at some point. Will Gervais, who's a psychologist, and Francesca Stavrakopoulou at some point at the end of summer, I think. So keep hanging out here, and we'll have some more good times. Good times. Anyway, thank you very much to Aaron, and the last 2 facts of the day, and I just have to do this because they are that important. I was obsessively renting Transformers the movie in 1986. Sobek, Lord of the Four Corners.
Sobek, fortunately, you chose the best Transformers movie. That the animated one from '86 is, in my objective opinion, the best.
So there you go. And James Apperson. So you've got well done, Sobek. You've impressed him. I won my last breakdancing contest and retired my parachute pants in 1986. Possibly my favorite comment of the evening.
So your parachute pants.
Did you really
so
win?
Quite literally saying, wait, just make sure.
Did you win a first one? I mean, is that true, James?
I'm just thinking, if he retired in his parachute pants back then, could he really have told anyone you can't touch this?
Please don't, Aaron. So James, parachute pants never go out of style. Of course,
that's because they never were in style.
This is true as well. Sorry. I'll grant you that. Okay. Anyway, look, I'm terrible at goodbyes. Everybody, thanks so much. Toodle pips. Remember, question everything, particularly yourselves. As ever, take care. Look after yourselves.